No contact with your avoidant ex isn't just a recommendation or a helpful strategy. It's absolutely critical to your healing, your self-respect, and your future well-being. When you maintain contact with an avoidant ex, you're not staying friends or keeping the door open for potential reconciliation. You're participating in a dynamic that continues to harm you, prevents you from moving on, and enables the avoidant to avoid facing the full consequences of their patterns. The avoidant benefits from ongoing contact because it allows them to maintain access to you without having to show up fully, to keep you as an option without committing, to feel validated that you still care without having to reciprocate. Meanwhile, you're stuck in a painful limbo where you can't fully grieve the relationship, can't move forward with your life, and can't heal from the damage their patterns caused. No contact is critical because it's the only way to break this dynamic, reclaim your power, force the avoidant to experience real loss, and create the space you need to remember who you are without their patterns distorting your sense of self. Here's exactly why no contact is not optional but essential when dealing with an avoidant ex. It stops the breadcrumbing cycle that keeps you stuck. No contact is critical because it's the only way to end the breadcrumbing cycle that avoidant exes use to maintain your interest without offering real connection. The avoidant reaches out sporadically with minimal effort, just enough to keep you hoping, just enough to make you think reconciliation might be possible. A text here, a comment there, a random check-in that seems to show they still care. But these breadcrumbs aren't genuine attempts at reconnection. They're the avoidant managing their own anxiety about losing you completely while maintaining their defended distance. As long as you respond to breadcrumbs, you're teaching the avoidant they can keep you available without doing any real work. The breadcrumbing keeps you in a state of hope that prevents healing. You can't move on because you're waiting to see if the next breadcrumb will turn into something more substantial. You can't fully grieve because the avoidant's sporadic contact suggests the relationship isn't really over. You can't invest in new possibilities because you're still emotionally tied to the avoidant through these minimal interactions. Subscribe for insights into attachment psychology that help you protect yourself and understand why these patterns continue. No contact breaks this cycle by removing your availability for breadcrumbs. When the avoidant can't reach you with minimal effort, they have to either step up with real effort or face the reality that they've lost you. The breadcrumb cycle also damages your self-worth because you're accepting crumbs when you deserve the whole meal. Every time you respond to minimal contact from the avoidant, you're reinforcing to yourself that this is all you're worth, that you should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention they throw your way. No contact restores your self-worth by establishing that you're not available for half measures. You're either all in or all out, and since the avoidant can't be all in, you're choosing to be all out. This boundary is critical to rebuilding your sense of what you deserve from relationships. It forces the avoidant to face real consequences. No contact is critical because it creates real consequences for the avoidance patterns in ways that staying in touch never will. When you maintain contact after the breakup, the avoidant doesn't experience genuine loss. They still have access to you, still know you care, still get validation from your presence in their life, even if minimal. This lack of consequences means they have no motivation to examine their patterns or do the work to change. But no contact removes all of that. The avoidant experiences actual loss, actual silence, actual absence of someone who was consistently present in their life. These real consequences are what create the possibility for the avoidant to have genuine insight into their patterns. When they can still reach you, they can maintain their narrative that their patterns aren't that bad, that you're still there so they must not have hurt you that much, that they can always come back if they want. But when you go completely silent, when you're genuinely unavailable, when they experience the full weight of losing you, it becomes harder to maintain those defensive stories. They have to confront that their patterns cost them someone valuable, that their behavior had real negative outcomes, that they can't just run patterns without eventually losing people. The consequences also protect you from being the one who does all the work to maintain connection while the avoidant continues their patterns. If you stay in contact, you're enabling the dynamic where the avoidant gets relationship, benefits without relationship responsibility. No contact forces the avoidant to experience what it's like when someone finally stops accommodating their patterns. This experience is critical for any potential growth on their part, though your no contact shouldn't be about changing them. It should be about protecting yourself and allowing natural consequences to occur without your interference. It creates space for you to remember who you are. No contact is critical because you need space away from the avoidance patterns to remember who you are without them. Being in relationship with an avoidant slowly erodes your sense of self. You start questioning your needs, doubting your perceptions, making yourself smaller to fit into the limited space they offer. You lose touch with your own worth because you're constantly measuring yourself against someone who's emotionally unavailable. No contact creates the distance necessary to reconnect with yourself, to remember what you value, to reclaim the parts of yourself you diminished trying to make the relationship work. The space to remember yourself includes recognizing that your needs are reasonable, your expectations are healthy, and your worth isn't determined by an avoidant's inability to receive you. When you're in contact with the avoidant, even minimally, you're still in the energy field of someone who makes normal relationship needs seem like too much. You're still getting subtle messages that you're needy, demanding, or overly emotional. But when you go no contact, you can start to see clearly that wanting consistency, emotional availability, and reciprocated effort isn't asking too much. It's asking for basic relationship functionality that the avoidant couldn't provide. The reconnection with self also means rebuilding your identity outside of the relationship and the avoidance patterns. You've spent so much energy trying to understand the avoidant, accommodate their needs, manage your reactions to their behavior. No contact redirects all that energy back to yourself. You can invest in your interests, your friendships, your growth, your goals without any of that energy being drained by avoidant patterns. This reclamation of your energy and attention is critical to healing and to building a life that feels like yours again, rather than a life organized around someone else's limitations. It breaks your addiction to the pattern. No contact is critical because maintaining any contact with an avoidant ex keeps you addicted to the painful pattern you need to break. The push-pull dynamic with avoidance creates a biochemical addiction similar to gambling or substance use. The intermittent reinforcement of occasional closeness followed by withdrawal creates dopamine hits and crashes that your nervous system becomes dependent on. As long as you're in contact with the avoidant, you're still getting those hits, still experiencing the highs and lows that keep you hooked into the pattern, even though it's destroying you. Breaking the addiction requires complete withdrawal from the source. You can't heal from a pattern you're still participating in. When you maintain contact with the avoidant ex, even if you're not in a relationship, you're still experiencing the dynamic. They reach out and you feel hope. they withdraw, and you feel despair. This cycle continues to reinforce the neural pathways that keep you attached to someone who can't meet your needs. No contact is the only way to stop strengthening those pathways and start building new ones based on self-worth, healthy boundaries, and connections that feel consistently good rather than sporadically exciting. The addiction breaking also includes grieving the loss rather than maintaining false hope. When you're in contact with the avoidant, you can't fully grieve because the relationship isn't completely over. There's always the possibility that contact might lead to reconciliation, that things might change, that the avoidant might finally be ready. This hope prevents the grief process that's necessary for moving on. No contact forces you to face the reality that the relationship is over, that the avoidant isn't going to change on your timeline, that you need to accept the loss and move forward. The grief is painful, but it's productive pain that leads to healing rather than the chronic pain of hope that never materializes into reality. It protects you from continued emotional harm. No contact is critical because every interaction with the avoidant ex has potential to reopen wounds and create new damage. Even friendly contact with an avoidant can trigger all the old feelings, the old patterns, the old pain. You think you can handle being friends or staying in touch, but then they're inconsistent in responding, or they share something about their life that hurts to hear, or they give you just enough attention to reignite hope before withdrawing again. Each of these micro-injuries prevents healing and often creates new pain on top of the existing wounds. The protection from harm includes avoiding situations where the avoidance patterns continue to hurt you even after the relationship has ended. If you're in contact, you're vulnerable to their hot and cold behavior, their lack of emotional availability, their tendency to show up minimally. You might see them moving on with someone else before you've healed. You might hear about them in ways that make you question your worth or importance to them. All of this compounds the original hurt with new hurts that make healing exponentially harder. The harm protection also includes defending yourself against hoovering or false reconciliation attempts. Many avoidant exes will attempt to pull you back in when they feel you moving on. Not because they're ready for real relationship, but because they're uncomfortable with losing their option, or their ego can't handle you being fine without them. If you're in contact, you're vulnerable to these manipulation attempts that get your hopes up only to result in the same patterns repeating. No contact protects you from getting pulled back into dynamics that will inevitably hurt you again, because the avoidant hasn't done the work to be different. It allows you to see the relationship clearly. No contact is critical because distance is required to see the relationship accurately without the distortion of the avoidance patterns or your own hope. When you're still in contact with the avoidant, you're too close to the situation to have perspective. You remember the good moments and minimize the bad. You focus on the potential and ignore the reality. You tell yourself stories about how things could have been different if you'd just done this or that differently. But no contact creates the space to see the relationship for what it actually was. A dynamic where you gave far more than you received, where your needs consistently weren't met, where one person's patterns prevented genuine connection. The clear seeing that comes with distance includes recognizing patterns you couldn't or wouldn't see while you were in the relationship. You start to notice how often you felt anxious, uncertain, not good enough. You recognize that you were doing all the emotional labor, all the pursuing, all the accommodating. You see that the good moments were exceptions rather than the norm, and that you were holding on to those exceptions to justify staying in a dynamic that was mostly painful. This clarity is critical to preventing you from romanticizing the relationship or the avoidant in ways that keep you stuck or vulnerable to going back. The perspective also includes understanding that the avoidance patterns weren't about you or things you did wrong. When you're in contact, it's easy to keep analyzing what you could have done differently to make the relationship work. But distance reveals that the problem was never you being too much or not enough. The problem was the avoidant's inability to show up for real relationship regardless of what you did. This recognition is liberating because it releases you from the false responsibility for fixing something that was never yours to fix. It opens space for someone who can meet your needs. No contact is critical because you cannot attract or invest in healthy love while you're still energetically tied to an unavailable ex. As long as you're in contact with the avoidant, even peripherally, part of your heart and attention is still occupied with them. This prevents you from being fully open to new connections. You're comparing everyone to the avoidant. You're holding out hope that the avoidant will change. You're not bringing your full self to new possibilities because you're still attached to an old, impossible one. The space for new love includes both practical and energetic availability. Practically, you need time and attention to meet new people, go on dates, build new connections. If you're still texting with your avoidant ex, still checking their social media, still hoping for reconciliation, you're not investing that time and attention in possibilities that could actually become something real. Energetically, you need to fully release the old relationship to make room for new love. As long as you're holding space for the avoidant, you're signaling to the universe and to potential partners that you're not fully available. The opening also includes learning what healthy relationship feels like so you can recognize and choose it when it appears. If you maintain contact with the avoidant, you're still normalized to patterns of inconsistency, emotional unavailability, and breadcrumbs. When someone healthy shows interest, they might feel boring or like there's no chemistry because you're used to the anxiety and intensity of avoidant patterns. No contact recalibrates your nervous system to recognize that consistent, available, reciprocal connection is what healthy love feels like. This recalibration is essential to choosing better partners in the future. It teaches the avoidant you mean what you say. No contact is critical because it's the only way to establish that your boundaries are real and have teeth. If you said you're done or you need space, but you keep responding to the avoidance contact attempts, you're teaching them that your words don't mean anything, that boundaries can be negotiated or ignored, that they can continue patterns without real consequences. But when you say you're done and then go completely silent, maintaining no contact even when the avoidant reaches out, you're teaching them that you mean what you say, that your boundaries are firm, that their patterns finally cost them something they can't just undo through minimal effort. This lesson is critical, not just for the avoidant, but for you. You're teaching yourself that you're capable of maintaining boundaries even when it's difficult, even when part of you wants to respond, even when the avoidant tries to pull you back. You're proving to yourself that you value yourself enough to follow through on decisions that protect you. This self-trust is foundational to future healthy relationships because it means you won't tolerate poor treatment just because you have feelings for someone. The boundary enforcement also creates the only possible context for future reconciliation to be healthy if it happens. If you maintain contact and the avoidant comes back, you're likely to fall into the same patterns because nothing forced change. But if you go no contact and the avoidant eventually comes back, you've established that access to you requires real change and effort. You've reset the dynamic so that any future relationship would have to be different because you've demonstrated you won't tolerate the old patterns. This doesn't mean you should use no contact as a strategy to get them back, but it means if reconciliation happens, it's more likely to be on healthy terms because you've established your worth through your absence. Why breaking no contact sets you back completely. Breaking no contact isn't a small setback. It resets your healing back to the beginning. All the progress you made in grieving, in reconnecting with yourself, in breaking the addiction to the pattern, gets undermined the moment you respond to the avoidance text or reach out yourself. Your nervous system, which was starting to recalibrate to stability, gets flooded again with the biochemistry of the push-pull dynamic. Your mind, which was starting to see clearly, gets clouded again with hope and rationalization. The setback is particularly devastating because it teaches both you and the avoidant the wrong lessons. You learn that your boundaries are flexible, that you can't maintain no contact, that you're still available despite saying you weren't. The avoidant learns that they can come back whenever convenient, that your boundaries aren't real, that they don't have to change because you'll always be there. Breaking no contact essentially rewards the avoidant for continuing their patterns and punishes you for trying to heal from those patterns. The complete restart of the healing process means that every time you break no contact, you're extending the total time it will take to move on. Instead of going through the grief once and coming out the other side, you're repeatedly reopening the wound and having to start the healing process over. This can keep you stuck in the pain of this relationship for months or years longer than necessary. No contact is critical because it's the only way to move through the healing process linearly rather than getting stuck in loops that prevent you from ever reaching resolution and peace.